Protests have broken out in Iran. Those protests are ongoing. They've resulted in the death of apparently 15 people. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is shooting people in the streets. They are now arresting hundreds of dissidents. The protests apparently started originally when people who did not like Hassan Rouhani, who is the radical leader of the political arm of the Ayatollahs in Iran, they didn't like Rouhani because the economy has been bad, and they started protesting him. Just like all the other protests in the Muslim world that took place during the Arab Spring, the original purpose of the protest very often has nothing to do with where the protest goes, right? The original protest against Hosni Mubarak in Egypt ended up with the Muslim Brotherhood taking power. In this particular case, it looks like there were some radical fundamentalists who started some of the protests, and then the moderates turned out in force. And now you have thousands of people marching through the streets of Iran. It's so bad over there that the Iranian government has shut down Twitter, they've shut down Facebook, they've shut down social media. I don't know whether these companies, by the way, are engaging in that process, whether they are allowing Iran to do that or not. If they are, they should stop allowing Iran to do so immediately. In any case, the Europeans have been utterly silent, as the Europeans often are when it comes to moral atrocities throughout history. President Trump, however, has not been silent. President Trump has been speaking out, and this is driving the left up a wall. It's driving the left up a wall for two reasons. One, President Obama was awful on the issue of Iranian freedom. He routinely quashed any sort of capacity for Iranian revolution and resistance. During 2009, you recall, a woman named Netta was shot to death on camera. It was a major worldwide story, and she was a protester. President Obama really did nothing about it. In fact, we have a clip of President Obama in 2009. While he's protesting how Iran was treating dissidents, he also said, "We respect Iran's sovereignty. Basically, they can do what they want. We're not going to do anything about it."
I've made it clear that the United States respects the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran and is not interfering with Iran's affairs. But we must also bear witness to the courage and the dignity of the Iranian people and to a remarkable opening within Iranian society.
Remarkable opening came to nothing because President Obama did nothing to foster it. In fact, at the time when President Obama was basically kowtowing to the Iranians, he was doing so because he was trying to force forward that Iranian nuclear deal that was just a disaster area for all involved. Maximized Iran's power, shipped pallets of cash to Iran, made Iran a regional power, allowed them essentially to take over Iraq, allowed them to prop up Bashar Assad in Syria, allowed them to extend their influence into Lebanon and Afghanistan and Yemen. That a lot of that had to do with President Obama deciding that he was going to turn the radical government of Iran into some sort of beacon of power in the region. That was Obama's decision. And he threw dissidents under the bus. He allowed them to die without any sort of worldwide effect. He says that there's been a remarkable opening in Iranian society. There was no remarkable opening in Iranian society. The media, Obama, they pretended that there was some sort of moderate regime that had taken the reins in Tehran. That obviously was untrue. As late as 5 months ago, there were Christians, newly converted Christians in Iran who were sentenced to 10 years in prison, bevy about 11 of them, all of them sentenced to years and years in prison for converting to Christianity. There is no major opening in Iranian society. There has not been. And now people are protesting. And President Trump, look at the contrast between President Trump and President Obama on this. Obama, who says, we respect Iran's sovereignty. Trump, not as interested in that routine. Here is President Trump's reaction over the break to what was going on in Iran.
Oppressive regimes cannot endure forever, and the day will come when the people will face a choice. Will they continue down the path of poverty, bloodshed, and terror, or will the Iranian people return to the nation's proud roots as a center of civilization, culture, and wealth, where their people can be happy and prosperous once again?
And that's, of course, what Trump said at the United Nations a few weeks ago. But he retweeted that in the middle of these protests. And then he came out and he basically said, I'm happy to watch the regime fall. Right? So Trump has not been unclear about his perspective on this. And Trump is 100% right. He is joined in this response by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Here's what Netanyahu had to say about the protests in Iran.
Brave Iranians are pouring into the streets. They seek freedom. They seek justice. They seek the basic liberties that have been denied to them for decades. Iran's cruel regime wastes tens of billions of dollars spreading hate. This money could have built schools and hospitals. No wonder mothers and fathers are marching in the streets. The regime is terrified of them, of their own people. That's why they jail students, That's why they banned social media.
Okay, this is what we call leadership. Now, it's funny. The left likes to proclaim that President Obama was a world leader. And we're going to get to the Obama administration response to all of this in a second. They like to claim that Obama was a world leader and that Trump has abdicated world leadership. Susan Rice, the awful national security advisor for Obama, the lady who used to go on TV and lie routinely about Benghazi, she wrote an op-ed for the New York Times in which she accused Trump of abdicating moral leadership in the world. But that's because the left and the right have two very different pictures of what moral leadership constitutes. Okay, the Obama administration is the kind of administration where when Israel had a guy named Qasem Soleimani, who's the commander of the Quds Force, which is a branch of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, a terrorist group, Israel had that guy in their crosshairs. They were going to kill him. And President Obama found out about it, and he told the Iranians about it because he was trying to prop up the nuclear deal at the time. Right? That is world leadership according to the left. World leadership according to the right is President Trump saying, listen, the United States has an interest in Iranian freedom. We'd be better off if this terrorist regime were not running that country and we had instead a moderate regime. Yes, a moderate Muslim regime in Iran. That would be much better. That's leadership. Now, why does that gap exist? Why is it that people on the left believe that Obama was a great world leader and people on the right believe that Trump is actually exhibiting leadership here? First of all, I'd like to point out that what Trump is doing here is very different than what Trump did on the campaign trail. On the campaign trail, Trump was a quasi-isolationist. America first seemed like a slogan that was more from Pat Buchanan than it was from Ronald Reagan. It seemed more like a Charles Lindbergh slogan than a George W. Bush slogan. In practice, it turns out that President Trump has acted a lot more like Ronald Reagan than he has like Woodrow Wilson, or rather than he has like a Pat Buchanan or Charles Lindbergh figure. That has been, I think, a very positive move. But the big difference between Obama and Trump on this stuff is how they view universal values like freedom and liberty. So for Obama, the way that he defined liberty and freedom is he looked to the Europeans, right? He called it leading from behind. He basically said, you know, there are morally relativistic values. There's no universal value of liberty. There's no universal value of freedom, really. It's just what majority decides upon. And if the entire European body says that freedom in Iran is allowing the regime to continue to maintain control, then we will allow them to do so, because that's freedom. That's liberty. So we'll follow the majority. The majority will tell us what freedom and liberty are. That was his version of leadership. Leadership is bowing to the majority. Trump's version of leadership is saying, listen, I think that there's a value called freedom. I think there's a value called liberty, and I think that America is a promulgator of those forces in the world. I think that America makes the world a better place. And I think that so long as we can pursue policies that make America stronger, that benefit America first, but America should be benefited because it is good and because it is great and because it is true to those universal values that are not decided by majority vote in the halls of power in Europe, then we should stand by the Iranian people. And that's the difference. And it's a major difference. And it's much more akin to George Washington than anything that Obama said. Now, if you look at what George Washington said about foreign policy, he said that we shouldn't get caught up in entangling alliances. What he meant by that was he said, the big danger to the United States, because we will be a world power. This is what he said in his farewell address. The big danger to us will be entangling alliances. Did he mean that we can't have alliances at all? No, what he meant was that America has to follow her own star. That American values are not necessarily going to be the values of Europe. And we can't sign permanent agreements with nations on the basis of values that can change over time. And we can't see ourselves seduced away from universal values that are worthwhile. We can't be seduced away from those values simply because the Europeans would like us to be. I think that is what Trump is saying here, and I think Trump is doing the right thing here, pretty clearly. Now, in a second, we're going to discuss exactly what it is that the left is responding to, because the left's response to Trump has been truly astonishing, right? These are all the people who say that Trump was not going to react well to chaos in the world, that Trump was going to be a danger to the world, that Obama was some sort of great halcyon of freedom and liberty and world leadership. But the response from the Obama administration figures, from the media too, has just been astonishingly garbage. I mean, really, really quite terrible. So here is what Samantha Power tweeted. So Samantha Power tweeted this out. She's the former UN ambassador under President Obama. She tweeted out, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the press secretary for Trump, had tweeted out, the days of America looking the other way from the Iranian regime's oppression are over. America stands with the Iranian people. Great. Samantha Power, who wrote a book on genocide and then presided over part of the administration that actively sought to allow Bashar Assad to participate in genocide. Samantha Power tweeted out, we stand with the Iranian people so much that we won't let them come here. And so she's slapping Trump. So we're in the middle of a fight with the Iranian government that is repressing its own people. And Samantha Power takes time out to bash Trump because Trump has a travel ban against people traveling from Iran. Now, I think what Samantha Power misses here are a couple things. One, Samantha Power has no leg to stand on whatsoever, as in no leg to stand on whatsoever, when it comes to speaking about the Middle East. She was participant in in an administration that upheld and strengthened the worst terror regime on planet Earth in Iran. But beyond that, the reason that so many Iranians want to flee the country is in part because they were propped up by the Obama administration. If the Iranians actually had a good government, they wouldn't need to come here. That's the whole point. This idea that we have to let all of the Iranians in, not vetted. We have to let any Iranian in who wants to come in, not vetted by the government, because we can't trust the government over there. Or we have to shut up about what's going on in Iran. No, the whole point is we want to change the government over there so they don't have to come over here. That's the entire point. And it's not just Samantha Power. Ben Rhodes, who is just a despicable human being. Ben Rhodes is, of course, the former Deputy National Security Advisor and Special Counsel to the President on Foreign Policy. He was a fiction writer who wrote short stories, unpublished short stories from a Brooklyn apartment before he was elevated to foreign policy specialty under the Obama administration. You'll recall that Ben Rhodes is the same guy who lied repeatedly to the American people. The Obama administration had a ridiculous story that they used to push the nuclear deal. And the ridiculous story that they used to push the nuclear deal was that the Iranian regime had now become more moderate, that Hassan Rouhani, the new leader after Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he was actually a new moderate type, and we had an opening. We had a gap. We were finally going to be able to do something moderate with the Iranians. And it was Rhodes who pushed this nonsense. It, of course, was not true. And then he lied to the American people about what the Iran deal would do. And then he helped ship pallets of cash to the Iranians so they could use them for terror. The Obama administration openly recognized that that cash was going to be used for terrorism against Western sources. Ben Rhodes tweeted this. He said, "The Iranian people are rightfully demanding dignity, less corruption, more opportunity, and greater control over their lives. In looking at U.S. Twitter, it seems lost on too many that this is about what Iranians want for Iran and not about us." First of all, Ben Rhodes, shut it, dude. I mean, if there's one guy who's responsible for the rise of Iran in the region, Ben Rhodes is that guy. But beyond that, if they're rightfully demanding dignity, less corruption, more opportunity, and greater control, might that have something to do with them protesting the same regime you just handed billions of dollars? The same regime you gave regional power? And it's not just Ben Rhodes. John Kerry tweets out too. John Kerry, back from the dead with his collapsing face, looks like a mudslide in the San Fernando Hills. Says, "With humility about how little we know about what's happening inside Iran, this much is clear. It's an Iranian moment and not anyone else's. But the rights of people to protest peacefully and voice their aspirations are universal, and governments everywhere should respect that." He's so boring that when you even read his tweets in John Kerry's voice, you start to fall asleep, and they're less than 280 characters. Let's be clear about something. When he says this is an Iranian moment and we should shut up, and when he says the rights of people to protest peacefully are universal, governments should respect that, those are mutually exclusive statements. If it's an Iranian moment and we should shut up, then we should shut up about how Iran is putting down the protesters. But the point here is that we shouldn't shut up about how Iran is putting down the protesters. We should be siding with the protesters. We should be giving them as much covert aid as possible, because they are part and parcel of bringing down possibly the most evil regime on the planet. The only other possibilities for that title would probably be North Korea and some of the sub-Saharan African regimes that have led to slaughter of their own people. But the notion that John Kerry is some sort of voice of leadership here, and all of this is to say, Susan Rice is saying the same thing. She wrote an op-ed for the New York Times saying that everybody should be quiet, Trump should be quiet. We tried quiet in 2009. How'd it work out for us? Not well. The reason that so many people are saying this is twofold. One, they're embarrassed by Obama's record on this. And they should be embarrassed by Obama's record on this. Obama's record on this is embarrassing. Obama's record on Iran is embarrassing. It is the great blot on his presidency, even more so than Obamacare. His movement of Iran to a central focus of the Middle East demonstrates that his heart was not in the right place when it came to the Middle East. And not only that, I truly believe the Obama administration has blood on its hands for handing billions of dollars to a terror regime, knowing full well that the terror regime was going to use that to fund Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and terrorist groups around the world. So the media are working full time to avoid criticizing Obama, because Obama, of course, is their great God, and he must never be ripped or sneered at in any way. Now, the other thing is that there is this feeling among a lot of the intelligentsia that America is evil too. This is what I objected to when President Trump during the campaign was saying things, as I mentioned before, about how the United States was like Russia and we kill people too. Right? That sprang from the sort of Ron Paul isolationist wing of the Republican Party. I objected to it. But that is a mainstream thought on the left. There are a lot of people on the left who believe that America is a negative force in the world. Obama believed this. He believed that America had done terrible things across the globe, and that as America shrunk her influence, that somehow this would make the world a better place. He believed that America was a participant in domestic evils that were on par with some of the things that were happening abroad. I remember he gave a speech at